everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our third webinar for the Road to Regroup. My name is Alysia Dicks, and I'm on staff with our Woodstock City Church location. And I have a couple of my friends here who I will introduce in just a minute. But I see you guys are already doing a great job hopping on the chat, telling us where you're from. We have people from all over the United States. I saw in Indonesia. That is amazing. Technology is incredible. Let me introduce to you my friends who are joining us today. We have Tim Cooper and Kadi Carroll. How about I let you guys introduce yourselves?
Kadi, you want to go first?
You are so kind. I was going to let you go first, but fine. Okay. Hey, guys. I'm Kadi Carroll. I'm on staff with what we call our media engagement team. That includes what many of you may be familiar with as Your Move, our After Saturday Night Live and YouTube broadcast channel. And what I do is I try to figure out ways how to engage our audiences into life change, into journeys of growth. So I'm not necessarily working in the physical church, but I'm definitely thinking beyond the walls of the church and how we reach people.
Perfect. Tim, how about you?
Hey, my name is Tim Cooper. I've been on staff with North Point for the last 12 years, and I've been in groups that whole time with a whole bunch of different versions of groups. But currently, I'm the Adult Ministries Director at Brownsbridge Church, working with our groups and care team up there. And then I also lead the Starting Point Ministry for multi-campus as well. So I get to do a little bit of everything.
That is fantastic. I love that we have both of you guys with us today, just with your perspective and your experience as all of us together are figuring out how to do digital church and connect people digitally. I'm excited to hear what you guys are trying and learning. I can't wait to hear from our participants today what they're trying and learning. I really want to encourage you guys to engage with us in the chat. We have a little bit of a direction that we're going to head today together, but we would love to hear your questions, get your feedback, and interact with you guys throughout the next hour or so. So today we are talking about how we are equipping our leaders to lead digitally. For most of us, this is a brand new arena that we've never been in before, with the exception of Kadi. And I'm sure there's somebody participating with us today that has a ton of experience. But Kadi, between the three of us, Tim and myself and you are the expert here in equipping leaders to lead digitally. So will you give us a little bit of context about your role?
I will. And guys, because we're keeping it real on this thing, my trash is getting dumped right now. So it's pivotal timing, pivotal. No, so I would definitely say I'm not an expert. We did, though, about a year and a half ago, kind of kicked off a research and development team to try digital groups specifically and see, did they work? Is community a real thing online when you have circles of smaller people? The authenticity of it. And so I will say that what we decided to try were just short-term groups. Can we create a digital space where people can take a low barrier entry? So they already are following along with our content, or they bump into it somewhere. And then they're like, I want more, but man, stepping into somebody's home for a conversation or stepping into a church for a conversation, that's a big leap for people. And what we found is that it did work. It grew quickly. So the hosts were even saying, hey, we're going deeper in some of these groups than we've even gone in community groups that we've done before. So for us, it was really growing the legs of, okay, this is something we should really be doing in our churches and for our broadcast channels too, of giving people an opportunity to come in and have a real conversation and just connect human to human. So let's think less about who are our leaders and what is the community group model, but let's take a step outside of that for a season and just see what are those pillars that people are attracted to and that make a really sticky circle for people where they can grow.
Okay, great. Tim, how about you? What's your context of groups at Brownsbridge?
Well, our church is, we don't just have groups, we are a church of groups. Our entire church for years, Andy and the lead pastors have all been saying, if the doors were to close on our church would still continue because of all the groups that are happening. We just never thought that would happen, that there wouldn't, we didn't think we'd actually have to, call them out on that. But that's the truth. We offer groups. We believe circles are better than rows. We try to get people to our church, but not just so they'll come to our church. We want to get them connected into life-changing relationships. So that is the extent of what I do all across, whether they don't believe in God or whether they're wanting to grow in their faith. We have a group that we try to offer for them. So we have exploring faith groups, and we have different groups for people that are trying to grow in their faith. And thankfully, we're in a very different situation than Kadi. Kadi's been swimming in this pool for a long time, and we went kicking and screaming and reluctantly. And, 1 week we are meeting all of our groups in homes across the city. And the next week we're jumping on and training people on how to use Zoom. And so we've had about a 90 to 95% success rate in getting groups to go from meeting in homes to all of a sudden meeting digitally. So it's been certainly, I would say, trial and error, but I think it's more appropriate error to learn to learn as we're going. But we honestly, and it went from something that I've never really had a lot of experience on to that's all I do now.
Well, and Tim, I want to give you some credit too, because, when all of this started, sure, people would look to our team and say, hey, how do we even do this? Is this going to work? And we're over here like, oh, absolutely, it works. Here's some best practices. But to be honest, even in the testing phase, when we were trying digital groups, the best hosts and leaders or whatnot and the best experiences were coming from the people that they needed connection and wanted connection. It wasn't coming from people that already had great community within their church and a small group and a starting point group. So it's a bigger challenge than anything our team had even been undertaking. So,
well, Kadi's recruiting leaders to lead digitally out the gate. But Tim, for you are taking existing groups, existing leaders, and you are transitioning them to lead digitally. So can you talk a little bit about how you're equipping them through this transition?
Yeah, it is amazing to me because I'm glad we're doing this live, because I feel like I change my approach every 5 minutes. So this is the current approach, and in 2 weeks it'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we did that. But right when this started, my job primarily is working with people that work with the leaders, and so right away, like everybody else, I was getting emails from every company I had ever done business with saying, in these difficult times, this pharmacy is here for you, or this local shopping center is here for you. I'm like, oh, thank you. That's really going to get me through this. So I didn't want us to jump into the current of what everybody else was doing. So we really talked about 2 pillars of communication, which one was personal over corporate. So when you're getting, literally, you've heard from just about every company you've ever given your email address to. You've heard from them, and they're saying, we're going to get through this together. Please shop at our store. And I'm like, this isn't helping. It's annoying me more than anything. So for the church to jump in that stream and just go corporate and say, we're here for you and all that very corporately doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I wanted to go personal over corporate, where it's like, hey, we want to be there for you, but we know your name. We want to reach out to you personally, and we want to be able to tell you that we are there for you. So, Alysia, I am with you in this time, and I'm praying for you. What can I do for you? Personal is better than corporate. And then the same thing.
Can I ask a clarifying question on? So when you say corporate versus personal, instead of a broad general email, let's say you have 20 leaders and you reach out to 20 leaders. Maybe you have 100 leaders, whatever the size. Instead of contacting all of them with general, I'm in this with you, you're saying the very personal connection of a phone call, a text, a direct interaction is
Absolutely. They're getting inundated with corporate speak, right? Everybody is. Our group leaders are. Everybody is. Everybody's getting inundated with corporate speak. Not everybody's getting inundated with personal connection. And so we want to make sure that even for our group leaders, whether you are somebody that works with group leaders or you're just a group or you are a group leader, you still want to have personal connection with the people that you're in community with. So personal over corporate every time. If you're thinking, every time we've sat down to write an email, it's like, hey, could we do this in a text message where we just individually text all the leaders that we're working with? That's been a real big pillar. The other one has been availability over information. So really early on, Adam Johnson, he's the lead pastor at Brownsbridge. He said the biggest thing that we want to do through this is not lose the trust of the people that we have been building trust with for years and years. So if we just inundate people with information, we're just going to lose trust. Everybody might come to our first Facebook Live thing, but then our 20th Facebook Live, the 20th of the week, there might be 2 people on there, and it's because they don't trust what we're putting out anymore. So the best way to keep trust was to share availability for people, not information. So when I'm talking to people that are working with group leaders, we're saying, be sure to tell them, hey, I'm available. We've been telling leaders all the time, look, I'm going to be on Zoom from 8 to 8:30 tonight. If you want to connect, jump on. I'm here for you. So they get a personal outreach from me, but then they also get availability from me. So I feel like the current that's been running is information and corporate. And I feel like as the church, we're trying, especially with group leaders, we're really trying to go in an opposite direction with personal and being available and connecting personally.
Wow. And I love that is so specific, not only to leading group leaders, but also if you are a leader, leading the people in your group to lead from a position of personal and availability. Yeah, I love that. Kadi, do you have anything to speak to with that transition?
It's very similar to how we set up all of our hosts. I think we try to, from a corporate side more so, when it comes to the technology and setting them up with, what to expect in a group. And hey, before your first group, here's some things to keep in mind. We definitely try to take the responsibility of that, but nothing replaces that personal connection. And we've seen time after time again of the people that are actually showing up. Because again, we're talking about a pool of people that are not already connected. So these are new people coming in. Having that, not only the first touch of, hey, I'm your host and this is a little bit about me, but even each week going through and touching base with people saying, hey, this isn't a log off and you're done. Like, you have the freedom and flexibility. Reach out to those people, have a follow-up question for them, ask how they're doing because something stuck out to you when you were in the group. And then similarly, our team, we're kind of like live. We know when our groups are going live at night and we kind of have our phones by us ready to help hey, if somebody's having trouble connecting, we're here. And I think it gives our host a sense of confidence because people are, even if they choose to lead in a digital environment, or if there's insecurity around it for sure. Technology is going to fail me or something unexpected is going to happen. And so we definitely try to just make sure we keep that personal connection, Tim. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Tim, we have a question from Brian that is very specific to this personal leading of our group leaders. Brian asks, are you setting up community group leader huddles at all? I know you said you're making yourself available for one-on-ones, but what about organizing collective gatherings for leaders?
That's great. Brian, that's such a great question. What we have been doing, we started out we've got more free time as groups directors and as pastors. We've got more free time than we could ever imagine. But what we don't want to do is just run with every idea we have. So we're trying to talk through them and offer availability and a personal connection as best we can. Those have been a really helpful decision-making filter for us. So we were doing Zoom calls originally where we would just say for the leaders, hey, we're going to be on from, noon to 12:30, and then tonight from 8 to 8:30, jump on if you want to. And people they would come on and they'd answer questions. But then a couple nights ago, our women's team actually said, we're going to have a game night. We're going to have a Kahoot game night for the leaders. And we've got 50 leaders that join, right? So when we we had a really high percentage of her leaders jump on because I think they wanted to laugh. And if we are meeting with them and saying, here's the best way to lead when what they need is a good laugh and to have some fun, we want to meet them where they are. So we're trying not to offer more touch points than we would for the whole, but we are definitely connecting more individually. And then you can tell if you've got 25 leaders and you text all of them and 4 of them text you back, those 4 really want some connection. And I think we should run with being the connection and being the church for them. If we can do whatever we can do during this season, we want to. But to assume that everybody is thinking about group a lot during this season is probably a little tone deaf on our part if we do that. Because right now people are worried about income. They're worried about, jobs. They're worried about health and safety. And in my neck of the woods with our church, most of the people are in this demographic of worrying about homeschool. So they're trying to get through Zoom calls all day long, and then asking them to do an amazing Zoom call at night is a little hard if we're not being empathetic and reaching out for where they are. So we are doing them, but we're trying to limit them, and then we're also trying to provide exactly what they need, even if that's just some fun.
That is so good, Tim. I love it. Hey, I feel this from a work perspective when we hit the ground running from working from home, it was so many meetings. And by week 2, I was like, I'm feeling a burnout because this feels unrealistic. And I'm feeling the grief of my friends and my family and the nation. So yeah, that's so good because I think we get so many ideas. We're so excited, and that'll just trickle down to, oh my gosh, and let's do this for them and let's do that for them. And people are like, give me a break or something stronger.
No one has seen an email in their inbox that says, hey, we've got a new Zoom call for you tonight. And they're like, finally, thank you.
That's right. Okay. So besides the obvious, what are some key differences between leading a digital group and leading a group that meets in person? Katie, you want to go first?
One of the most obvious is you have to be willing to strip the format that you may be used to for physical. Duration is a big one. So, a 2-hour Zoom call or 3, some small groups go 3 hours. It's probably just not going to happen because you're not going to have the small talk, the showing up and catching up on life quite as long, or the rabbit trail conversations that happen. So we always say, shoot for an hour. You'll get some really good, solid conversation out of that. The content that you use for our groups, people are watching a 28-minute length message before they come and then talking about it. But even really for any group, it's, letting people consume content on their own time and then just show up for good conversation. And if you're not in a series that's really going to be conducive to that, even my own small group, we've used the Gottman, I think it's called the Gottman deck. It's from the Gottman Institute. And it's for couples, and there's open-ended questions on there. I'm not kidding you. We can drop one question to the group. And for instance, one for last week was, what are you most proud of in your spouse from this past season? And we talked for an hour and a half, and we're talking to each other as a couple, and then we're sharing it with the group. And it was actually really fruitful. So there's just this sense of be flexible, be willing to, take on whatever the group is really good at. You might have somebody in the group that has a great idea. Try it out, because there's really no right and wrong. It's forming to, if we're creating an accepting and safe environment for people to share, because they are in the middle of grief. They are trying to even figure out, why don't they feel God's presence right now in the midst of so much going on? Turn it into a valuable time for community and for relationship, and not be so worried about, well, this is how we used to do it in person.
Yeah, that's great. Tim, what about you?
Well, Katie, that's so well said. And Katie is really the expert on this for us. And it's really cool that she has been paving the way on this. And we've been talking about this for years. She has. We've been listening, but she has. The interesting thing that we are experiencing is for Katie's groups, her experience, they were signing up for an online group. All of the ones that I'm doing, I'm trying to make sure that's right. Yeah, all the ones for Brownsbridge, every single one of them signed up for an in-home group, and now they're all sitting in an online group. So there's already a missed expectation that they're all dealing with. But one of the things that I think, gosh, I feel like we all need, and I need to hear myself, is just being a little kinder to ourselves in the midst of this. This is the first time any of our group leaders have led a small group during a global pandemic. So if some of our A+ leaders aren't acting in an A+ way, That's okay. And just trying to realize that this is really hard. I know one of the most helpful things for me has been just naming what I'm feeling, because I'm feeling things at a whole different rate. And I don't operate daily with grief, right? I normally try to think about what I'm thankful for each day, but I don't sit around and think about what I'm grieving. And every day, with each passing day, I realize something I'm grieving. Easter, I mean, that was hard. It was hard to not be gathering for Easter. I mean, it's hard to not be meeting with people. So the fact that our leader pool is dealing with more and more grief than they've ever had to deal with before, I want to elicit as much empathy as I can and just share as vulnerably as I can that I'm not made for this. I'm a massive extrovert, right? I am meant to be around people. And Zoom doesn't fill that bucket. I'm annoying my neighbors. They're like 6 feet. I'm like, just give me a hug, But it's hard. It's just hard for our leaders to put that in context. And if we're coming at them where we're pretending like group is the most important thing in their world right now, I feel like we're going to be totally amiss. But if we're trying to meet them where they are and encouraging them to model that to their group leaders, I feel like they're going to be set up to succeed.
Tim, have you had people, leaders reporting back that their groups aren't being consistent or people are popping in and out? Because I can imagine life is hectic. And even though we are within our own walls, there's a lot going on with homeschooling and whatnot. So have you seen an attendance change?
I have not been privy to that. If there's been an attendance change, thankfully, because there's already the accountability of we committed to this group for 12 to 24 months or 9 months or whatever the group decided was their duration ahead of time. They've committed to it. And so for the most part, we've seen people that are still connecting and they're grateful for Zoom because I don't know what else. I'm grateful for that connection because, Katie, the people that sign up for digital groups, they're expecting it. And so it's kind of easy to build, not easy, it's easier to build the rapport when you are intentionally looking for an online group. Thankfully, the groups I'm working with, they had, even the groups that began in January, they still had months to get through their stories or, connect and bond. And hopefully there was a rapport before they jumped on digitally. So I feel like there's good accountability because they already had that connected. We're not really trying it. We're not trying to launch groups in this season.
That's great. Yeah. We've seen a definite, we talk about flexibility all the time with our hosts because when you're talking about newcomers coming in for the first time, I mean, we've even done things as in our before your first group email that goes out, we say, hey, if you're too nervous to turn on your camera, just use audio. It's not ideal, but and things like that, that's very different from physical groups. But we just are trying to keep in mind, okay, what are the apprehensions of somebody coming in for the first time and telling the host, people may not show up week to week. We had a lady the other day a host that reported somebody showed up in week 3 and it frustrated her at first. She's like, I feel like we were just really getting a relational foundation for this group. And this person shows up on week 3 and she was calling from her closet or logging on with her video from her closet, sharing that she's deciphering whether or not she should stay with her husband and keep her marriage together. And the host was like, I can't believe I even was upset for a second that she popped in because our conversation was richer and the group went so much deeper instantly because she showed up and shared her journey with us. So we see a lot of like, hey, yes, you got to be flexible because it's technology, but you've got to have this additional layer because people are coming in from all over the place and at different stages of the journey. And it takes a lot of courage to share your life. So that's always been a key for us for sure.
That's a great reminder that not everyone is going to have the same comfort level with being on a digital platform. We had a question from Stacy, and this speaks to what you just were sharing, Katie. How do you create a safe and comfortable environment on a Zoom call? So you mentioned allowing people to join with audio. That may not be ideal, but in the spirit of flexibility and helping people get used to it, do you have any other suggestions that you recommend to your leaders?
The second one that just comes to mind is that we always say the host jumps first. So when people show up on the Zoom call, because you're not in the room together, it can be a little bit awkward of, okay, well, there's silence and well, who goes first or whatnot. And so we just always tell the host, hey, yeah, you're here to listen 80% of the time, but really make sure that we want you to connect human to human with these people. So be the first to jump and to just share something. Other than that, we do see that a lot of times digital groups tend to lend to authentic connection because you got to think about people are in a safe space. It's a lot more awkward a lot of times to go show up in somebody's living room for the first time or show up to a church building than it is to be on your own couch. And you're behind a screen and there's a sense of anonymity there. So those pieces actually do lend to feeling like it is a safe space. But I think the strongest piece for that is always going to be the host. I mean, if you're willing, vulnerability begets vulnerability, right? If you as the host are leading out in that way, people are going to follow because that's what we all want. We all want human connection way more than we want a leader per se.
Okay. Tim, have you coached your leaders in how to help people break the ice, or do you feel like this is unique to people joining for the first time digitally because your groups were already existing beforehand?
Yeah, I haven't felt as much with breaking the ice, just because I feel like that's probably what they're best at. I think the other thing that's hard, I mean, this is just such a different format, right? You normally you tell a joke and you might hear some laughter in a room, or in my case, you hear no laughter, but even that's comforting because, at least I'm being consistent. On this, you tell a joke and you get nothing, right? So if a group leader is like, so I told this hilarious joke, and you just see people doing this in silence on their Zoom call, it's not the same. So the icebreakers are hard, but at the same time, I think you have to work hard to embrace the silence. That's important when you meet in a physical space. It's also important when you meet in a digital space. Just because people aren't answering right away doesn't mean you have to jump in with a thought or an idea. You can embrace the silence and let it sit and let people talk.
Yeah.
Let people think before they talk.
Right. Okay, so as we're specifically equipping leaders to lead digitally, have there been any things that you guys have found that doesn't work? Things we need to stay away from as we're equipping leaders to do this?
Well, I think the number one thing we can do for group leaders is we can help them manage expectations. If you can set appropriate expectations in leading a group, you have a much better chance of succeeding. Not because the way that you would lead it is different, but how you feel in it is different. Like, I wish somebody would have set expectations for me on being a homeschool teacher, right? Before this all started. It's like, you're going to be awful every day, all day long. It's like, oh, well, thank you. Now I know what to expect. That would have been helpful. But if we can help manage expectations for leaders over this, like, hey, whatever you were hoping group would be, let's talk through the people in your group and what it could look like for your group to do well in this season. Let's manage expectations. If you have a group that just started in January and you barely know each other, maybe the best you can do is just stay connected over the course of this pandemic until we can get back together. If you have a group that likes to go deeper, maybe you can ramp up the content and go every other week and read more books, or, there's different things, but managing your expectations as a leader and being honest with your expectations as a leader is hugely important. If you're hoping for a breakthrough every week when people are, it's not like we can even get a sitter. I've got 4 young kids. I can't believe none of them have come into the screen since this started. But it's not like we can get a sitter. So we have our group tonight. My wife and I are leading our just married group tonight. And there's no sitter. There's no chance for this to be this, amazing thing. So as I ratchet back the expectations, I'm then surprised and I'm glad when I do see growth and I do see God working. Because that's the other thing. Just because things are changed, God is working, right? God's working on people's hearts. There are people that are disconnected. There are people that chose not to get in a group in January because they thought how busy their spring was going to be. And now they're regretting that. And then there's people that were like, gosh, I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm going to get in a group. And now they're not alone going through this because they have people to connect with and they're not trying to make it up as they go.
Yeah. Okay. So managing expectations is really important. What are some best practices that you're coaching your leaders to utilize in leading digitally?
Well, I am one is I'm a yellow and I'm an extrovert and I'm a like if the first question isn't let's make it fun, then I'm not really that interested. But I do want them to think through the fun. Don't just jump into group. We're doing trivia tonight. We lead a just married group with another leader, and we're having them all bring A and B cards, and we're going to do trivia over this just because it's easy and it'll be fun. Just a chance to enjoy and laugh and have some fun. So programming the fun, playing Kahoot, doing whatever you can, I think is really important. And then the second is kind of what Katie was talking about with those questions beforehand. I would think through the questions ahead of time. If you can think through the questions, you might be able to kind of go off the cuff normally, or just like, we'll watch the content and then. But if you're coming into this with just a how's group? How are you guys doing? And hoping that lasts an hour, you're going to be pretty disappointed. But if you can come in and think through 2 or 3 questions, and maybe even send them out ahead of time, I think you're going to have a much better success rate at people talking because they've been able to think through it on the front end. So I feel like those are the biggest 2. Plan for some fun. It's okay to not cover a ton of content, and then think through the questions that people could be having conversation around before you start.
Yeah. I know as a leader, when I am in a room together with my group members, it is so much easier for me to be comfortable with silence when we're having a discussion. I mean, there are some people in my group who are processors. I'm married to a processor. I am like you, Tim. I'm a yellow. I'm an extrovert. I verbally process. But one of the things I have specifically had to learn as a leader in this season is to sit in the awkward silence that, you throw out a question, you're on Zoom and people just look at you. For whatever reason, I've grown comfortable with it in person, but in Zoom, we're 7 weeks in and we had group last night. I'm like, just stay with the silence. So.
Well, and so much of it too is like Tim and our intro, right? You're just letting other people jump in first. You don't want to talk over each other, but it does. It's like it takes another level of like gut grit and confidence as a leader to step out on a digital platform for sure. Because there's a million other things where you're like, I'm failing, not doing it.
We have a question from Christy that I wanted to throw out to you guys. Christy says she's struggling between thinking about people in groups needing their relationships versus encouraging people in groups to be in the Bible. So how do you guys navigate that tension between spiritual growth and relational growth and relationships?
For us on the Your Move side, we have discussion questions that have been curated for every single message, and it does that in mind with, let's start light and relational and connect on a human level, and let's flow down to the more serious of, biblical application, or what does this look like for me personally? Now, in our context, we are targeting non-religious folks. And so it's not going to go as deep in scripture or meditation in the word, like a small group maybe would be more prepared to do. But we do try to set up any type of discussion questions of let's go from light to heavy in the duration of that group. So maybe for community group leaders, Tim, I don't know what you would say, but that's something to think through, even in just the questions that you're planning to try to prod people to go deeper.
Yeah, I think you made a really good distinction on especially getting people that aren't used to talking about God to talk about God in any shape or form is awesome. So with ours, the thing that we talk about with community groups for years is we talk about the ABCs of community, accountability, belonging, and care are really the things that they can expect and experience out of community. So if they're looking for it to be all of their scripture intake, then I think they're going to be disappointed when, somebody is sharing how hard homeschool is. They're going to be like, I'm not here for this. This is my only chance at the Bible. I need to get the Bible. And so what we say is that kind of falls under accountability. Like, yeah, we're here to hold each other accountable to making sure that we're in the Word and we're reading the Word over and over. But if the hour that we have set aside for group doesn't every time go really deep, we're not so disappointed, because we know this is our chance to belong. This is our one chance to experience belonging, true Christian belonging. And then ultimately we can experience care, which you really can't get elsewhere. So you don't have to, and that's not to say that I would want every group to be one long prayer request fest, just how is everyone? I don't want that, but I don't want them to just set their expectations back to what I was talking about before. If you're going to set people's expectations that this is just a Bible study and we are going to study the Bible, you're probably going to want to encourage them to get in another group that allows them to experience accountability, belonging, and care, because they need that as well as they need a deep dive on the scriptures.
That's a really good point. In my group, Tim and Alysia, this is semi-embarrassing to admit, being a staff member, but they were, our leaders brought up that they wanted to do the story of Scripture, which was a program from DTS. And I mean, it's phenomenal, but it was 2 hours of videos a week. It's studying and discussion questions. And I was actually the one that, and my husband and I spoke up in the group and said, hey, this season of life, we have a 2-year-old. We're both working full time from home. We've got a baby that's due in a matter of weeks. This is not, I feel like I'm faking it. I'm showing up and I'm faking it. And I don't want to do that. And so whether we need to just kind of pull back for this duration of group or whatnot, we were the ones that spoke up and said, we can't go that deep right now. And our group ended up kind of doing that, of saying, hey, well, the majority of them did want to. And so they still do it and get together. But we still have our group time for an hour to an hour and a half every single week, where it is more personal connection, checking in relationally, and still, prodding spiritual growth for sure, but not going quite as deep as we all planned right before the pandemic hit.
Right. Yeah. Our lives have drastically changed in the last 7 weeks. So like you said earlier, managing expectations is so important. That's really good. And for some people, it's easier to have the courage to push back. Katie, yeah. I think that's your wiring. And for the people who are more harmonious, that may be a little bit of a struggle. But for us to coach our leaders, especially if we already have relationships with the people in our group, to be aware of who may be struggling, kind of read the room, read the group, and figure out, is this the time for us to try to go deeper? Or right now, do we really just need to focus on the check-ins? How are people doing? How can we be praying for each other? And how can we encourage each other to follow Jesus in the midst of these pivotal circumstances for most of us now? Okay, we have another question from Adolph. Any advice for coaching our leaders who lead our older demographic? We've got some, our older group may not be as comfortable with the technology. So Tim, how have you or your team equipped your leaders of older people?
I feel like I've been training for that my whole life with my parents. No, you're not on, Mom. No, I can hear you. No, please, Mom. Never mind. No, we have had some very sweet people that really want to connect. And we are, that's not the bulk of our leaders, but the ones that have, we've had groups directors. One of my groups directors has 150 leaders, and she spent over an hour and a half with one leader trying to figure out how to set up Zoom. So if we had to do that for every leader, that probably wouldn't work. But we're encouraging them to get creative. And also we're trying to care for our older demographic as a church. We went and we pulled everybody that was over 70 in our database and called all of them that aren't connected into a group, just to see how they're doing and see if we can help. And if we can get groceries or anything, like just be praying, because we don't want anybody to feel disconnected, and especially in isolation, feel disconnected. So we are trying to encourage, you could do speakerphone and merge calls. Some that's a possibility. If Zoom doesn't work, or just continuing to encourage them to call each other and talk to each other to stay connected. And again, don't expect it to be what it was before, right? This is not at it's not meeting together at your favorite restaurant, going deep and doing all that. That's not what this is. So the more we can manage expectations for them and give them some solutions that won't fix it, but will help them feel connection, is really important.
Yeah, that's really good. I had one of my older group leaders where they were joining me on a leader huddle Zoom call. They actually joined in. I had 3 of them, and they were joining in. And so my assumption incorrectly was their group was meeting digitally. And then after our 3rd meeting, they said, Alysia, can you help us figure out how to get the rest of our group members to be comfortable? And so we did a Zoom call, just the 3 of us. I was able to share my screen. I showed them how to invite people to meetings. We spent about an hour together. They practiced inviting me. I got the email, it was.
It's so sweet. It's so sweet.
Once they had a little bit more confidence, then they had the confidence to invite. Because the great thing about Zoom that I found, once you get the invite, you just receive the invite and press the link, and they were able to join. It was the leaders figuring out, how do I do this? And so thankfully through technology, we can walk them through a little bit more. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, we've got another question from Brian. This one, he's talking about launching new digital groups. So what length of group and type of content would you recommend for new digital groups? And you're equipping the leaders to lead these. He said, we've already launched starting point groups, the 8-week version, but wondering if there are other kinds of content-driven short-term groups that you're planning on offering. Do either one of you want to speak?
Katie, why don't you go first?
Yep. That's exciting to hear. Anytime you're doing new digital groups, I think it's phenomenal. We focus a lot, Brian, on felt need. So we survey our audiences regularly to try to hear what do they want more content around, et cetera. And so it's always that relationships, anxiety, peace, personal growth. So for your move, what we try to do, there's Who Needs God. We would call that kind of our lighter pre-starting point series. So that one's 5 weeks, but 5 weeks is the longer side. So we've even tested 1-week groups. We had one 2 weeks ago that we ran. We used the series Fearless. It's a one-time series, and the group closed in a matter of hours. Everybody wanted to talk about it. And it makes for that digital connection to be so much more of a breeze because you're talking about something everybody's interested in. So I would think really leaning into felt need topics right now. Emotional health is a big topic, fear and anxiety, and making sure that you're trying to keep them anywhere between, a 1-week group is great, but obviously our goal is to get those people into a longer group from that point. So I would say, anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks is your sweet window of saying, hey, this isn't a long-term commitment. Just come in and have a conversation about the content you're practically already watching or wanting anyway, has been really helpful.
Katie, would
ahead,
you,
Tim.
I don't know if this would be, if you would disagree with this or not, but when I'm leading a starting point group in person, I'm not pulling people out. I'm not like, especially the first week, I'm not like, so Alysia, what do you think? I'm letting them kind of just be silent. I'm letting them participate in whatever way they want. If somebody were going to get onto a 1 to 2 week short-term group or an 8-week or a 5-week, do you think it's okay in that first week to say, hey, Katie, I'd love to hear from you. What led you to signing up for very safe, easy softball question like, hey, what led you to signing up for this group? I'm just curious. Yep. We're so glad you're here. That's a
great point. Yes, I do think it's okay. I think there is a light, casual way you can do that. But we also post report back a lot of times. And so now it's kind of a part of our training. We say, hey, week one, if you feel like you just needed that to warm up and get to know each other, that's fantastic. And then if everybody's in agreement of like, hey, well, let's kick off the conversation about what we watched next week, that's fantastic. And sometimes that helps because then by week two, you've established enough knowing who's who that you can say, man, this is what really stuck out to me this week, and I'm really wrestling with this. Anybody else feel that way? I think that's always the easiest handover is anybody else, to give them a chance to speak up. And then after that, yeah, if you know people's names, it's, well, hey, David, tell us what you think about that. So it does make a big difference.
One of the things that we try to equip people with, just when we're talking about the art of asking good questions, is focus on what and how questions, not why questions. And I think that's just as important when we're talking about digital groups, because if you're, being choppy and it's coming across weird and they don't know you and you're like, why are you in this group? It's like, oh, they left. They must have been having technology issues. It's like, no, they're having you issues. But if you're thinking through how you ask your questions and you're really putting the work into showing the posture that you have of empathy and just being glad that they're there, you can ask a lot more what and how questions. Like, what are you hoping to get out of this? What is it that led you to coming into this group? How did you even hear about it? Those are all really easy questions because they all have an answer to them. But why didn't you follow God in your teens is it's an interrogative posture versus a humble questioning posture.
Yeah, the curiosity aspect of that is missing, it seems, in a why question, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why questions are what interrogators use to get information.
That's right.
What and how are what curious people ask to generate story and to learn more.
Yeah. Oh, that's
and we, even with the hosts, we try to pair people with content. We ask the host, hey, what is a topic or what's a particular series that really strikes you either from where you've come from or where you are right now? Because again, it sets up that environment that people aren't logging on and it could feel like an online classroom of like, oh, well, are they going to be judging my answers? And who's this leader person? That's why we choose the term host, is because it is supposed to be, hey, you're the person to just make people feel welcome and let them know they're in the right place and just facilitate conversation. And so if we're kicking off groups all the time and somebody's saying, hey, yeah, I'm 1 year sober and starting over changed my life. And it's really applicable for me to even go through it again right now. Man, we know that group is going to kick off so well because they're showing up as themselves saying, I need this too.
And Kadi, that, normally in a live environment, I can get the sense from you, right? Oh, this person's very warm. Where that's
Absolutely.
hard over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard. Yeah. So yeah. I think, this is something we talk about all the time. Humble, teachable, curious, and intentional leaders are the most influential leaders that we have in our churches across the board. Teachability in this season will be huge. Like a leader that comes on and talks the whole time, that's nobody's gonna, be interested in that. But a leader that's teachable and that gets on and is like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm not leading because I'm the expert. I'm leading because I'm willing to facilitate this conversation. But hey, where are you guys finding hope at this point? Like I'm not necessarily finding hope everywhere I look. Is there any place you're finding hope? And putting yourself in the place of a learner, not just leader, I think goes a long way to generating that discussion.
Yeah, that's
absolutely
a great point. Okay. This may be our last question, but guys, with our new normal, can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I wanted to make sure. You know how sometimes Zoom pops up and it's like, your internet connection is disrupted. I was getting about 10 of those. So I wanted to make sure you could hear me. But as we have this new normal where more people are getting used to leveraging technology and the Zoom calls, how do you guys envision using Zoom to actually equip our leaders? So when we can go back, Tim, we can go back to leading in person. Kadi's leading digitally because her people are in groups. Who knows where they live? But how do you envision leveraging Zoom and digital meetings to equip leaders?
Well, I'm going to need a recovery period, so I don't want to see Zoom again for who knows how many years. No, I know that the nice thing is I feel like we've all learned it. I mean, there's so many of us that, we'd have a meeting before and we'd have somebody FaceTime in or something like that, and we just weren't really sure with it. There's very few people that aren't very comfortable with Zoom at this point. So even if they don't like it or even they're fatigued with it, they're still comfortable with it. And I feel like we can utilize this. We could jump on a Zoom call for a leader one-on-one. We can talk through leader trainings and do huddles in ways that are very cost effective. And I also feel like it gives us a new platform for kind of deciding, is this a in-person training we want to launch that costs X amount of dollars? Or is this a Zoom training that we want to do that costs less money, and we can find a way to communicate through that. So I think there's a lot of potential. And the nice thing is, it's like a cultural phenomenon, a cultural wave that most of our leaders are going to be comfortable with the idea of this in the future.
I'm personally excited to see what comes of this for the local church afterwards, because, I think we've had hordes of people around our perimeter that have wanted to get connected, but haven't been able to because they travel for work. They're a new mom and they carry too many responsibilities in the home that they can't get out. They're homebound and sick. When we started our research and development phase, we heard from so many of those people, and it's heartbreaking. And we're trying to do the best we can in ministry, but we don't realize we have so many constructs set up of, hey, and we are darn good at it, right? We're going to put the money behind to make those great events, those kickoff, to create the schedules and the season. But when people want to find a group and it's not the right open season, they have to wait until, 6 months down the road. And we've set up barriers that we didn't intend to. We were just trying to be excellent at what we were doing for our communities. And so I think spending this season digital, it's opening up new opportunities to where, like Tim's saying, we can reassess. And it doesn't mean everything has to go digital, but it does mean that we can learn from some strengths of it, and we can open up digital group opportunities or easier entry points for people to initially get connected, or more of a revolving door, right? Where people can come in at any time and get connected somehow versus having to wait until our ministry season opens back up. So that excites me. I think we're going to learn a lot from the church if we're willing to continue to be flexible. It's forcing us to be flexible right now. And if we can continue to lean into that, I think the number of people we can impact is going to just be unsurmountable.
Katie.
Yeah, I'm really excited by the opportunity. Tim, what were you going to say?
I think one of the things that I would never have been open to trying that I'm certainly open to trying now is maybe this fall we launch groups that we say, look, these will eventually be in home, but the first meeting might be might be on Zoom. And you think about the on-ramp into community, what a safe on-ramp. If, okay, I'm going to get in a group and my try before I buy period is just in my living room, in my office. It's like, that is such an easy on-ramp into community that I've never thought of before. But now if that's, who knows where we'll be in August, but that could be an opportunity where people can easily get online and join a group before they would go to the church or go to somebody's home.
It's so true. And it's so natural. Like we knock it until we need it. Right. And, and I felt some of this at the beginning of this whole wave of, okay, well, now everybody wants to do digital groups, but they're only wanting to do it because they need it. And I was kind of begrudging because of it. But I thought, no, hallelujah, that we all are entering into this perspective, because there have been thousands upon thousands of people that have needed it, but we've been knocking alternatives because we thought we had it figured out already.
Well, guys, thank you so much for your time today. I have really enjoyed the conversation. I hope it was helpful for our participants today. I have really enjoyed all of our webinars so far. So if we weren't able to answer your question, I hope you guys will join us next Wednesday for our next Road to Regroup webinar. We will actually be saving this recording and sharing it on the North Point Partners YouTube channel. So if there's anyone who you would love to have this conversation with, if you want to go back and review something that Tim or Kadi shared today, we would love for you to go to the YouTube channel and view it there, share it with your friends, and make sure you give us a like there. We would really appreciate that. But we hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday. See you guys.